Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yojana Sharma, and I'm back here again with a power packed panel of tech leaders, diversity leaders, CHROs to talk about the diversity agenda at tech workspaces. On behalf of TechGig Goddess, I welcome all of you to today's virtual panel discussion on should everybody own the diversity agenda to make it more relevant? Diversity has been a key agenda and a main topic for boardroom discussions for a long time. Creating a creating a gender diverse and inclusive workplace is important for a number of reasons, which include maintaining healthy work culture and business profitability. A recent study suggested that businesses with gender diverse workplaces were 21% more likely to attain above average profit. While everybody knows it, everybody believes in it, and everybody is working towards it, the $1 million question still remains: who owns this agenda? Is it the company's top leader? Is it the CTO? Is it the CHRO? Is it the diversity leader? Or is it the people themselves? To discuss this and the other subtopics related to it, I have curated a panel comprising of CHROs, diversity leaders, CSR leaders, most importantly, the people who make policies and programs for their people, for their workspaces, to make tech workspaces more happier and culturally diverse. I'm privileged to have with me a very experienced and august panel comprising of Shaonli Mukherjee, Director, Product Operations CBK Global, Pranali, Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer, Icertis, Arun, Batra, GDS Consulting Leader, EY Global Delivery Services, Shilpa Sinha, Senior Vice President, Global Corporate Communications, CSR and D&I of Hinduja Global Solutions, Sugandhi A, Vice President, Technology, American Express. Together, we will be talking about the need to address diversity in 2020. Do leadership-led diversity agendas really work? The impact of career success on inclusive cultures and versus the diversity agendas, and lessons from the corporate floors, what newbies can learn from their leaders. Without taking too much time on talking about the main topic, I would like to request my panelists to introduce themselves and also share their opening remarks on the main topic. Over to you, Shaonli. Let's begin with you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity, Yojana. I'm Shaonli Mukherjee, and as you rightly introduced me already, I'm the Director for Product Operations at CDK Global. Overall, I have about 18 years of experience, primarily into building, evolving, and managing operations for various industries like customer service, tech support, IT infrastructure services, e-commerce, as well as product implementation. So I worked for places like HSBC, IBM, Amazon, and Genpact prior to working with CDK. Without talking much more about myself, I think I will quickly give my opening statement for today's debate topic, right? So according to me, I think there is a whole lot of underestimating oneself and the fear of those unknown risks and what ifs, that has clearly led to the situation wherein today we are looking at diversity in corporate workplaces as a very hot agenda or an issue that needs to be addressed, right? But if we forget about every other aspect and just go back to the basics, right? I think if there was no diversity, we cannot even bring a soul to life, So in the fundamental, you see, there is no difference. And all the differences here on, I think, are a result of continuous conditional thinking of our spontaneous brains in a particular direction based on several perceptions, age-old thought processes that completely limits us from becoming the best version of ourselves. So I think just to summarize, for me, more than externalizing this particular issue to various other reasons, because when some reasons are killed, others will be born. I think it's more important to internalize and think about what are the, how do we break those conditional shackles and try and build an ecosystem which is favorable, which will help us thrive and grow. I think that's my initial bit on this topic. Thanks, Kirti.
Next, I'd like to have Pranali talking about the opening remarks.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Pranali. I work with Icertis as the global CHRO, and prior to Icertis, it's been several different organizations across many different cultures in the world. So I should say that I've looked at diversity from different industry aspects, different kind of organizations, as well as how different cultures see it. And the one learning is that wherever you go, whichever the place, it is always something that needs to be on top of the agenda, and we might see or feel that it's practiced more someplace or less someplace. I think it's never the case. So there's always a whole lot of need to put focus on this topic. And I'd say that today, especially, it's becoming even more relevant, and it's also an agenda that is pushed not just from within the organization, but also from the community at large. This year, particularly with all the events that have happened across the globe, North America, Black Lives Matter, all of these have, I think, made people, communities, and families even more aware. And I think it's no longer a luxury. It never was, but it just has fought its way to the top of the chart, so to speak, from a priority perspective. And the current scenario with COVID has added to all of this with even newer flavors. How do you look at diversity, equity, inclusion in the new paradigm of hybrid work models? Is it going to be more inclusive for somebody or less inclusive for someone, depending upon your place of work, depending upon your home? And we've opened up our homes now, so we're bringing a flavor of our personal lives into the professional. And I think it's an all new face that we see for diversity, and it's exciting times for people who are leading these initiatives, irrespective of whether it's leadership, it's a DNI camp, or it's an employee group that's working on it. So I'll take a pause here and looking forward to the conversation.
I think I would really like to have Sugandhi's opening remarks.
Hey, thanks, Yojana. So I'm Sugandhi. I've been working with MX this year, but I have about 20 plus years of experience handling multiple jobs. I mean, in terms of infrastructure, application, transformation, etc. And this topic, I mean, what we have chosen for this panel is very, very dear to my heart because it's a need of the hour. We've seen that generally diversity we associate it with the gender. But typically, if you go beyond that, I mean, there is ethnicity, there is social economic background, I mean, which we need to be conscious about. There is race, which is becoming very relevant, I mean, today. So the gender diversity topic that we're talking about goes beyond just the gender. And the second one is the workforce strategy also in today's world is changing. We have millennials, I mean, who are coming in over here. And we have tenured resources. I mean, in case if you're very comfortable working with your organization because of the empowerment, I mean, and the engagement that you have, you'll have the tenured resources. Now you have generations, I mean, also working within an organization, and diversity and inclusiveness becomes of paramount important, I mean, to be thought through because it's the need. And it's also important from a business perspective. I mean, and it's a business imperative today. And it also fosters creative thinking and also brings in a lot of innovation. And today, when digitization is the need of the hour and where man and machine is coming together, I think so inclusiveness and diversity it plays a very important role. And I'm so happy, I mean, that we have all come together to talk about this topic. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sugandhi, for that opening remark. Geek Goddess was actually conceptualized keeping the fact in mind that, every time we talk of tech, there's a very usual picture of a young guy working on his laptop. So we are trying to break that myth that, girls can code. That's been a hashtag this year. And TechGig Geek Goddess has been in existence for the last 6 years, driving this agenda vociferously with very encouraging partners like you. Coming back to this discussion quickly, I'd like to have a word from Arun Batra and then from Shilpa.
Thank you. A warm welcome to all my colleagues. My name is Arun Batra. I head Global Delivery Services at EY. Have worked with banks, services, IT services organizations, and now with a professional services firm, global institutions, been exposed to different situations, scenarios, and cultures. First of all, I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me to such an important topic. I'm the only male in the room right now, but that actually should indicate that diversity cannot be a women-led agenda alone if we have to make it a success. It's very important. During the course of the discussion, I will share more of my thoughts and views around this. There are some important things for us to reflect as a team, as leaders. Diversity was brought into the boardrooms discussions maybe about 2.5 decades back. While we can take pride in the progress that we have made, and amongst each of our organizations, the percentages may vary, but it will be somewhere between 30 to 40% from a diversity perspective. And I am happy to note that each one of my previous speakers have talked about diversity beyond gender. But keeping that into aspect, maybe the ratio is 30 to 40%, right? But think of it, even after 2 decades of intensive intervention, of board level support, of very well-defined policies, of very well-defined roles, specific roles, enablement teams, right? We are still at only 35 to 40%. I have seen studies which show that it will, at the pace we are going with respect to the change, it will take us another 65 years to come to some level of parity. So this topic is never too late for a reflection, and hopefully during the process of this dialogue, each one of us will share our experiences, we will get new ideas, and all the listeners, right? I hope you will also be able to take away some learnings. And during the Q&A, of course, we will try to answer more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. And Shilpa, quickly we're waiting for your opening remarks.
Thanks, Yojana. A warm welcome to all the people who are listening here, to all of us. Thanks a lot to the TechGig Geek Goddess platform as well for having me here to share my thoughts and share some, looking forward to this conversation. I'm Shilpa Sinha Harsh, and I lead diversity, corporate communications and CSR at HGS. Overall, come along with around 21 years of experience, and I think my opening remarks here, I'll just like to say that the conversation around diversity has moved beyond gender. And second, I would like to say it's not just equality now, it's about equity. Equality brings us, as if I can say, it's inviting you to the party. Equity is telling you to dance. It's all about saying that, yes, it's all about having a culture that gives you the equity, which gives you the platform to be successful. I think that's where the conversation now is. And I think that's where the need also is to reinvigorate the discussion around diversity. With that, over to you, Yojana.
Great. And from what I've gathered after speaking to all 5 of my panelists here is that, even in 2020, if you're talking about diversity, it's a very pertinent issue. It's a burning issue. While there are many more realms to diversity pertaining to maybe race, maybe ethnicity, maybe being specially abled, or coming from a different sexuality, or etc. Now that we're talking of gender diversity on this floor, is how relevant is the talk in the tech floors in 2020 versus some years ago when this topic was just being included in the boardroom dialogues. I'd like to begin with Pranali.
Yeah, so I think the relevance has not changed. In fact, it's only, not changed is incorrect. It's not reduced. In fact, it's increasing even more. Because while progress is being made, I think the conversations are also getting deeper. Earlier, it was about maybe, as a lot of the co-panelists have been saying, it was about maybe starting to look first at gender. Now there are so many more facets that come in. Even within gender, the conversations were more about how do you bring more women into the workforce. I think today it's about how do you let those women do what they are hired for, much the same way as anyone else would. So, as Sugandhi was, Shilpa was mentioning about equity, and that's increasingly important. So, I think that the tonality of the conversation, the depth of the conversation, this is changing now, and plus I would say more participation from more than just the leadership saying it or a DNI champ saying it, but it's also the movement is much broader, and there's more push. It's not just a pull factor now. That would be some of the things that are differing.
All right, Arun, you're talking about redefining the diversity debate in 2020. You come from a consulting domain. I'm sure. Would you like to throw some light on what different industries, what it's like in different industries, or is it just tech that we're talking about here?
So great question. So, if I were to expand the definition of diversity, it talks about gender. That was the old. Now it's about, for a global firm like us, it's about nationality. For a multidisciplinary firm like us, professional services firm, which is into tax, audit, technology, and strategy, there are various nuances of diversity applicable to us. There are cultural background. We have seen and heard a lot what has happened in the recent past in some of the countries. It's a question of language. It's a question of ethnicity that you talked of. It's a question of generation as well. Within the different service lines, there could be a mix of people with a different age profile. So it's become pretty extensive. And from my perspective, right, there are a couple of things that, while we are not prescriptive in terms of what it needs to be with respect to each firm, or within each firm, each service line, or within each service line, each sub-service line, or in a simple word, whether it should be technology or business consulting, etc. I will obviously focus a little bit on technology consulting, given the platform that is there. In the technology consulting space, we have lagged behind to what I would say to some of the more mature service lines that exist in professional services like tax and assurance. If we reflect, right, we'll have, at least in India, right, we have more women who come from, let's say, who have traditionally come from a commerce background, and which naturally finds itself to a role or a path in areas like tax and audit. So from my firm's perspective, we are extremely diverse in those service lines. Okay, in some cases, actually, if I just focus only on gender, we have actually a 54% preponderance in one of the service lines of the women. But on technology, and each one of us are from technology background, right? We have some ground to cover. So it varies by the work that we do. Having said that, in technology, right, given the pace of growth, given the areas that we are all working in, right, which is at the at the emerging technology space, we need a very diverse skill base. For us, what is important is skill, right? And then we have to create the platform. In the past, we have done a good job by focusing on the numbers at the entry level, right? So over the last few years, because this has been on the top of the agenda, in fact, for the last few decades, we have done reasonable movement at the bottom of the pyramid or the mid-level of the pyramid. Now the narrative is changing to two parts. One is which is at the top leadership level, right? And second is an equity at the my colleague mentioned about equity. So what we are trying to fix is that when we hire people, there is a certain minimum salary that a person will get irrespective of whatever is the background. And that ensures that the person comes in at the right base itself and you're not in a catch-up mode. Because again, research has shown that if the entry itself is wrong, then it has a cascading effect for decades, right? It becomes very challenging to catch up. So there are things that we are doing. So I would say the narrative is changing to addressing the equity part. I will talk about a little bit more in detail in what our firm is doing to address the equity. Some really groundbreaking initiatives that we have taken on pay parity. And the second is on the leadership part.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. I think we'd really like to hear a lot about the initiatives that you were mentioning here. I would quickly like to speak to Shilpa on the equity thing that she initiated. Mr. Batra continued, and maybe she can elaborate it on a bit, after which I can speak to the rest of the two ladies.
Sure. So thanks for that, Yojana. When I say equity, I'm talking about, do we have the platform for a woman to succeed? As I had said earlier also, it's about being inclusive. It's about having policies that give the woman the right place to succeed. And that's not like a one-off or a one-time campaign or a boardroom initiative. Equity comes always from, while yes, I'll agree, empathetic leadership is key to this transformation, but equity or the real change happens when each and every individual leader across all the levels of the organization needs to, get buy-in into the value of belonging, equity, and inclusive, culture, both intellectually and emotionally. That's how then we'll see that equity is actually happening along with equality. We have to, while we can start from the top, it has to be a grassroots movement. It has to be policies led. It has to be ERGs led. It has to be diversity champions. It has to be pulse checks. It has to be regular connects. It has to be regular awareness and sensitization. That's when equity comes.
Okay. Sugandhi, I'd really like your view on redefining diversity agenda in 2020.
Okay. Going back to what I just want to tie it up with what Arun mentioned, as to what it is, what has changed today versus what it was few years back. If I had to recollect, the days I passed out of college, the general thought process was, do some commerce or bachelor's kind of a degree, get yourself into a banking or a state government or a central government kind of a job. And technology was something which was reserved only for one section of the agenda. That was the thought in those days. Look at the investment that we do today. The kind of women or the kind of female participants in the STEM industry, the STEM field, is humongous. There are a lot of people who are also getting into the line of mechanical engineering, which has not been heard of, few years back. So today, the diversity of the people, even in selecting these subjects, have changed multifold. So that's one of the other reasons why you can see a lot of women in technology and lot of openness, even coming from parents, to invest, in the children taking up, technology and pursuing their career. And people are very serious about the career. Yes, we have a problem to solve, because if you look at the entry level, there are a lot of women, who are there. But if you look at the people in the boardroom or people in the exec level, the numbers are very, very limited. And that's exactly what Arun mentioned. And it's a reality. So we have a lot of work to do in that space. But then the question is, we are recognizing and we are acknowledging the fact that diversity is important. The question is always to look at how we can reinvent the approach towards diversity so that everyone can come together to create a cohesive culture within the organization. Because at the end of the day, we all acknowledge that diverse view, similarities and differences have to coexist in order to foster innovation, foster creative thinking, and to solve complex problems that we are heading towards. Because gone are the days when everything was being done by man. Today, a lot of things is being done by machine, and today man and machine have to coexist. Now that is something which we are getting into a very, very complex environment. The second one is technology is changing every minute, and therefore you have to be on top of it. And if you have to be on top of it, you cannot encompass or have all the qualities that you're looking for. You cannot be a specialist in networking, specialist in collaboration, specialist in teamwork, specialist in technology, which is also changing every minute. So you need to have people, who are coming with your own skill set together with that culture that you're trying to create. I think so you will be able to solve the problem. And on top of it, today we are in an era where we have to work with Zoom calls and conference calls, and the workspace also is changing, which is also making the interaction and engagement and belonging more difficult. And if we have to really solve the problem, then we need to redefine, reinvent the approach towards diversity and make the entire topic inclusive, for us to survive, the challenge that we have in front of us.
That was a great point made. And Shaonli, while you speak about redefining diversity in 2020, please do also mention about this virtual working and the role of women colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with some of the points that all my colleagues have just mentioned. So I will maybe talk about some of the basics, right? And talk about 2020 in particular. So it's been a roller coaster year for everybody. I think this is the year which has clearly told us, how to get more done with less, and the entire redesigning our priorities has become a necessity this year, right? So when I look at 2020, for me, the work has actually invaded our homes, right? It's not the other way around. So what I see is a major challenge when I see diversity in workplace, right? One is, the inability to kind of manage both work and home simultaneously and very efficiently, right? And I have faced it. I think most of my colleagues have faced it in some form or the other. For some, it has been more pronounced. For some, it was easier. But one couple of things that I think has benefited or will benefit most of our diverse population in workforce is to have the ability to draw the clear and thin line, the thin line, but a very clear line as to where work starts and where it ends, and when family time starts and when it ends. And this has to be done very, very consciously, right? Otherwise, one is definitely going to invade into the other. So that is one very important thing that I understood, that how we need to redefine the priorities, and keeping in mind that it has become more and more necessary to reorganize our day-to-day life, reprioritize at all points in time to make sure what is more important, what is the need of the hour. Irrespective of, you're a woman employee or a man, it is important to skip some of our commitments. When you are in an environment where you cannot clearly classify this is work versus home, I think it's important to understand when to say no to some of the commitments. And, it's okay to not do everything by yourself. It's important to build that support system around you of people, and both at home and at workplace, whom you can lean on to kind of reach the goals that you're supposed to reach. So I think this is the difference that 2020 has brought in more than anything else. And also talking about some of the wins, right, on a regular basis as to what has worked really well for you. Many of us women particularly do not do a great job of talking about what good things have we done, right? So I think we go with that age-old proverb and say all that glitters is not gold. I think we should unlearn that and say that in order to become gold, we need to glitter. I think these are a few things that we in mind when, particularly if you're in a virtual environment, because out of sight cannot become out of mind. So that is my 2 cents on this stuff.
Subtopic that we had created for ourselves today, which is, do leadership-led agendas really work, or every leader needs to wear that agenda on his sleeves? I'd like maybe Shilpa and Arun's view first, and the others little later.
Sure. So if I can say that It's both. It's about both. It's about both in terms of executive sponsorship and also doing it at a grassroots level. Diversity is advantageous, if I can say, both from an employees and the bottom line. But the static and siloed diversity programs will not create systemic change. It has to be together. Shifting the company mindset around diversity means creating, excitement around the differences, and that comes from with changing the idea that diversity is a zero-sum game. It has to be approaching diversity like every other challenge we face, and we do that together. It is both sponsorship and grassroots. And it can be very tempting to introduce a diversity agenda and say you've solved the problem in the boardroom. But a step beyond this involves, initiatives at the grassroots with that aim to get more people in the door and create support networks within the company walls. It's not just about meeting the D&I standards. The goal now is to foster a sense of belonging and having an inclusive culture. And that only happens when the agenda is led across by each and everyone involved here in the company.
Great. Arun, what's your view on this?
I would want to just reinforce that a little bit more strongly. So there are 3 or 4 roles. I'm classifying roles broadly in an organization. The board has a certain role of setting the agenda, of sharing its vision, drawing up a purpose. That's it. There is our talent organization, right, has a certain objective of defining the policies. And I would say more around monitoring the implementation of the policies in a transparent manner. But the execution of the diversity agenda will only be possible or should be done only by the business leadership if it has to be successful. That is something that cannot be delegated either upwards to leadership or sideways to our enabling teams like HR or talent organizations. Not only that, I'm of the firm belief, and I credit my previous organization to this as well, and EY also with the same view. Who are the biggest blockers to building a diverse organization? If I were to be very blunt, right, the current majority is the one which is blocking the agenda or not enabling the agenda. They may not be blocking it, but are they proactively enabling it? So unless and until the current majority, whatever that current majority be, whether in terms of race or sex or gender or whatever it is, unless and until the current majority is made the owner of driving the execution, it will be a challenge. So just putting women, if we believe that we will put women in leadership positions, let's say that is required. But if I say I'll put women in leadership positions and make them run the diversity agenda, right, I think it will be another big failure. It has to be led by the majority, which is right now. It has to be led by the business, which has to execute and own it. HR has to enable it, has to monitor it, provide the guardrails, right, so that we stick to a policy, we remove our biases. Leadership has to set the vision and the purpose.
Pranali, I would really like your quote here. Yes.
Yes, I have been wanting to speak because I do differ with due respect to what you just said. Because I think that when the majority leaves an initiative, okay, let me take a step back. I think it's a joint responsibility of several groups and several segments. But the one statement that I have a difference of opinion is when you say that it is the majority that takes the leadership to drive the agenda. And that's where I differ. Because I think you need to wear other shoes, to empathize. Not everybody can do that. I think you need to have representation. To your example, when it's a woman leader who's, part of driving the agenda, I feel it does make a difference, and for a variety of reasons. One is the optics part of it. I think people identify with it. People kind of, look up to it. They have that belief that, okay, somebody is in this position. So it inspires as well. So that's one part of it. The second is, I think it also brings a different kind of set of issues to the table that which may or may not be understood as well by the male leaders. So there are different people, but I think I'm generalizing this a bit. There are people who are extremely sensitive. In my previous organization, we had a male leading, with 2 other women, and it was really good. But in general, I'd say it's not. You need to balance it out. I'll stop there. I can see a lot of hands going up.
Fair comment. Yes. I did not mean, when I said majority, it does not mean at the expense of exclusion of the minority, right? What I meant was, by just having a women leader run and own the initiative will not solve the problem, right? Because the problem is existing in the majority, right? So we've got to make the majority responsible, along with, of course, nothing can be done alone. Let me again clarify, right? There are multiple roles on the organization. All these roles are interconnected, right? Nothing can be done at the exclusion of any part. That is not my intent, and that's not my idea. What I meant is, we have to hold the 70% people accountable. That's what I'm trying to tell you. By putting a women leader alone without holding the 70% people accountable is not going to solve the problem. So that was my only clarification, right? But I totally agree with what you said. Okay, thank you.
I think I would agree here that just having a woman leader take the charge and say that yes, I'll change everything never happens. And I like to reiterate that siloed aspect of having a culture or building a culture never happens. It has to be done together at the grassroots, because if the majority, see, we can define the policies, we can define the business leaders, as you said, Arun, the HR leaders, everyone, you can define the policies, you can define the networks that women are there, you can define the support system, but you cannot define or control the behavior on the floor. What happens on the floor is very, very different, and hence it to have that culture, it has to be inclusive, it has to be a lot of grassroots and people together, and it has to be consistent and sustained. Otherwise, cultures don't change just at the blink of an eye.
Great. So I have 2 hands up, please, Shaonli, and please continue.
Yeah. So just to add on to the process, right, in terms of leading the diversity agenda, I think it's nothing in isolation. It has a complete life cycle, right? It does not end with just setting up the agenda or putting things in action. It does not just end by attracting the diversity population to join the organization. It is something that has to be handled with care at all stages of an employee's life cycle in the organization. And it's not just at the leadership level, for sure, because at all levels, and particularly we have to make sure that the accountability is mutually owned by the diversity employees themselves, right? There are several data trends, as you rightly mentioned, Yojana, in the beginning, that it clearly shows that organizations which foster, an inclusive culture and a diverse workforce have shown much better results in terms of innovation revenues, in terms of engagement levels, the level of overall decision making, etc. So I think a few things that still continue to have some roles to play in order to not make this as successful as it should be is, again, there are some very conscious and unconscious biases across people in the organization, right? When it comes to attracting diverse population or assigning responsibilities to them. And I think as long as that remains, no agendas and nothing else is going to work. We have to kind of, So the last thing that I want to say before to close this, I think having a genuine interest in making this work is very important at all levels. And of course, we need to also look at what kind of support is needed to build a safe place and an environment where we can sustain this. I think this entire aspect is very important, and not just the agenda or not just the people.
So Gandhi, you have been wanting to speak on this for a long time. The stage is all yours.
Okay, I think so. We've spoken at length about the roles and responsibility, who has to drive what. We also spoke about the entire process life cycle. I completely agree with that. But my important message here would be, first, the organization has to believe that there is diversity which is required. Some of my experiences, I have seen that it's a number game. They actually want to show that either to attract talent or to be in par with the competitors, you just because you put it as a vision and a mission statement, and make it public, does not mean you believe that this is a problem that you want to adopt. If that belief is not there, even if you have the best of the policies, even if you have the best of the talent, even if you have very clear demarcation of responsibilities, it's very, very, very difficult, to make it, as Arun said, 70% or 90%, very difficult even to move a 1% within the organization. So first is the belief that there is a need for diversity. They have to believe that there is a value coming from a diverse set of people. They have to believe that this diversity is going to help them bring about a growth and bring a growth mindset within the organization and create a cohesive culture environment. And for them, the employees are super critical, and the organization is not just run on profits and revenue and processes. For employee to be together, to bring that teamwork and cohesiveness, diversity has to be acknowledged that there is a problem to solve and there is a need to solve as well. And so this has to be acknowledged first. Second one, it is not about leadership, because like we have seen in many companies, you can have the best of the leaders, best of the strategies. But if you're not able to translate and get the buy-in, of the people who are working for you, who are the majority, most of the strategies, even if it is business related, will fail. So at least within American Express, we've seen that we create a lot of cross-functional teams, and a lot of empowerment is given to people who are, at the manager level or at the engineer level, in order to drive such initiatives. There is thought leadership, and one of the important critical success factors is the middle management. You have to get the buy-in of the middle management and make them part and parcel of such initiatives. And there has to be more time spent on explaining the need, the outcome, and not just translated to a number game. This is not a tick in the box. Because since the impact is so high, you need to spend time in educate the impact, and also say that if you don't do it, what are the repercussions for the organization and for us as an individual or employee working for the organization. So these are the 2 or 3 things that I would love to reiterate, that this is not about one individual or one group. It's all coming together, but every role within the organization or every department have the individual share of contribution in order to solve this particular problem or to achieve this mandate.
Great. This was, I think, the most fiery questions of all. And alongside, we have also captured the essence of the next question, which is diversity agendas versus inclusive cultures. While all of you have almost spoken about it, but I'll just quickly take one minute view each on a clear winner between the two. Pranali, please, you go first.
For me, inclusion is the way and diversity is the natural outcome. I think if you build an inclusive culture, you will automatically have diversity there.
Okay.
So if you do just the diversity part, maybe you will get a good, set of diverse population into the organization. But unless you back it up with, a culture that's inclusive, policies that are inclusive, and you really reinforce that, you won't be able to retain them, you won't be able to motivate them, and, there's no point in doing it, as a lot of my colleagues have said, just to make that tick in the box. So I would just vote for inclusion.
Shilpa, I would like your view, since you head D&I, this is your favorite topic.
Yeah, so I would, Pranali absolutely said it completely right. It's about inclusion comes first, because it's all about bringing your own complete self to work. I could be hiring we could be hiring a lot of diverse set of people, but if they are not comfortable, if they don't feel safe in the environment, and if they are not able to bring their whole selves to the work, then diversity is just a number game. It is
Okay.
about doing things in the right way, and hence it's about inclusion and culture for me.
Arun, what's your take? Quickly.
Well, it's just a reinforcement of what my colleagues have said, right? Creating an inclusive environment automatically create a diverse organization. If you don't have an inclusive environment, then to me, diversity will be like a leaking bucket where you get all the percentages right in terms of hiring. But if there is no platform where people are valued, listened to, rewarded, they will just move out of the system. So
Sure.
if we have the right inclusive environment, diversity will happen. Diversity will be sustainable. So it's a natural.
Great.
We are interlinked.
Great.
But it can't be just because I have
Yeah.
a diverse culture, I'm suddenly become a great organization to work with.
Okay. Quickly, Sugandhi, your view, followed by Shaonli.
No, absolutely. The highest vote, I mean, to inclusiveness for sure. Because if you have a diverse culture, they need to be heard. They need to be respected. They need to feel proud of what they're doing. They need to be recognized and rewarded. For all this, the success criteria, the success factor is to be inclusive. So inclusiveness is super critical for the diversity to sustain and to grow within any organization, for sure.
Great. Shaonli, your view, please.
Sure. I think to sustain diversity, inclusion is the behavior that I think we all have to abide by. There's a whole lot of role modeling, supporting, mentoring, acknowledging, and also I think exposing the people to the right set of skills and capabilities is very, very important to make sure that this whole thing works. So one without the other
Great.
is not.
So while we were great.
Is not.
So while we were all talking about different aspects of diversity, inclusion, and we had a sort of little fiery debate on what works and what doesn't work, there's a plethora of questions that people are posting for us here. I'll quickly try to take the questions which are relevant to this forum, and I'll try to direct one question to each of you. First question is related to evaluation in the times of virtual working. Pranali, you being the CHRO, I'm directing this question to you. There's a question from Meeta P. She writes, I'm working from home, but it's made team evaluation very difficult. What's your advice on effectively measuring team productivity other than the usual KRA, KPI stuff? What's your advice for her?
So that's a fantastic question, actually, and I'd only say that there are views and everybody's trying different things. We don't have all the answers yet, but to me, I think what works is more than the standard KRAs, etc., which earlier to a large extent were measured by the traditional supervisory methods. The manager
Yes.
is checking, etc. Those aren't possible anymore. So more and more, it's moving to a culture of trust, and you kind of define the deliverables a bit better and try to crystallize those, and then it's more about trust. So it's more about empowering the employee in the first place, so that she or he does not need to keep coming back to check, or can make decisions that are needed for work. And then is the deliverable happening within the time needed? I think that's the direction that I would give.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think she would have got her advice on managing teams effectively. There's a question related to program management and managing career in consulting. Arun Batra, please take up this question from Ratna Nimlani. She's saying that, I work in different time zones in a consulting career. Program management requires multitasking at any given point of time, and there are times where I feel the burnout. So what's your advice to sort of excel in a consulting career while managing many things at the same instant?
Consulting is a great career, and while we We are not unique in working across different zones. In the IT industry, all of us work across different zones. Having said that, I think time management is now a very personal thing, right? It is for an individual to define when to shut down, when to be operational. And it has become all the more relevant in a work from home environment. I want to acknowledge that in a work from home environment, we actually, many of us are now starting off earlier and ending later. But that doesn't mean that we cannot and we should not take more breaks in between, right? I want to link it to the previous question, right, which is about measurement of productivities and stuff. The firms, whether it is consulting, everyone is now moving towards measuring output. We're more interested in the output, not in the effort, right? Not how many hours you're spending. So if the output is there, it's up to you to define your boundaries. And I can say with absolute conviction, personal conviction, right, that your leaders will fully abide by the boundaries that you set. There are artificial impressions that we ourselves have of what our bosses expect from us from an availability perspective. If you set the rules of engagement, right, trust me, you will not have to work crazy hours. Yes, whether it is consulting or tax or audit or any project driven activity, right, there are peaks and troughs. Okay, if there is a go live that needs to happen, right, yes, people will be working on weekends because the go live has to happen on Monday. When you're making a project go live, there is extensive testing that will be going on. You have to be ready for any chaos. Those things are there. But subsequent to that, there are times when the work pressure goes down. So it's not fixed, but it is totally dependent on an individual of managing his or her own time, and you should set the rules of engagement. That's my view.
Thank you so much for that piece of advice. A lot of questions are coming related to work sabbaticals. I'm trying to pick the best question here, but I'll take one question related to raising your voice in your workplace. Shaonli, I want you to answer this question for Raima. She says, I've been working for 2 years and I want a role change now. I want to raise it to my manager, but I don't want to sound offensive about it. So what's the best way to reach him with this request?
Honestly, this question, I'm thinking about the culture that is currently there in their organization. But honestly, I think if a role change is essential for every individual in a professional career, right? So a few things that I would have done maybe in a similar situation is I would have first evaluated what kind of roles are available in the organization, right? And there are various ways to know that. You can reach out to your enabling leaders, you can reach out to other leaders, you can directly reach out to your leader as well to kind of understand what kind of roles are available and what interests you, right? The second step is definitely to ensure that whether you have the skills to kind of move into that role, right? If you move, will you be successful? So I think that's the second thing that she should look at, is whether she has the right skills and capabilities to kind of get on to that role. And I don't it is going to offend anyone if you have performed your role for 2 years and have given the kind of productivity or whatever is expected out of you in the last 2 years. I think it's the right time to formally speak about it with your leader and together chalk up a plan. I don't think that will have any kind of feeling of offensiveness to the leader.
Thank you, Shaonli. I think the 3 pointers that you mentioned would really help her. My next set of questions is for Shilpa Sinha. It's related to career breaks and work sabbaticals. Neeta writes to us, she says that, I have come back from a maternity break and I get the regular projects to work. I want to tell my manager that I'm ready to pitch in for more work without making it sound like a complaint to him. I'm sure he's trying to sort of accommodate to her timelines, etc. So what would you advise her in this situation?
I think I like to tell Neeta that be very, very honest and candid with your supervisor. Because as Arun rightly said, we have our own created perceptions and biases in our minds that whether this will work or that will work. I think for all such scenarios, and especially if when you've come back after a sabbatical, the first and foremost thing you have to do, and as a woman, and is talk to your manager and keep him or her absolutely apprised that this works for me and this doesn't work for me. Be absolutely crystal clear and say that I need some time off. These are the work boundaries that I'm setting up for myself, and be clear and say, yeah, I can do more, and I'm back here, back in the game. Trust me with more work. So I'm absolutely sure that the supervisor will be very happy to give her more work.
I also feel the same. All right, I have a heap of questions, but I can only pick one last question for Sugandhi. It is from a person called Pratiksha M. She says, I'm a network engineer working in a Hyderabad based in, sorry, I'll just take my question again. I have a heap of questions here. I'd like to take one last question, which is from a lady called Pratiksha M. I'd like to direct it to Sugandhi. She writes, I'm a network engineer working in an MNC in Hyderabad. I would like to understand the growth prospects for me for network engineers. What's a possible career ladder likely to be?
In today's world, there are a lot of career opportunities. Be it network or be it storage, it doesn't matter. And network, even with cloud, coming up, the network engineer's job is highly, highly secured, I would say. So she has a brilliant future in front of her. Having said that, we are moving more towards a generalist kind of a role, because we are now talking about full stack engineers. So which means though there are specialists, in network or in storage or in provisioning, etc. The more and more, because of the cloud evolution and the technology transformation that is happening, there is a need to be a specialist in almost all. So full stack development, is a need of the hour. I would strongly recommend to Pratiksha to not only specialize in network, because that's her core and she should start improving her core, but also start looking at Azure or AWS or anything which helps to get into a full stack engineer kind of a profile. That would definitely help in the future, because now today even infrastructure is becoming as a code. So and today we are talking about site reliability engineering, which is all about debugging and coding. So let her concentrate on getting her hands dirty in terms of coding and not just in administering the infrastructure. And these few things would definitely help Pratiksha move a long way in her career.
So I think two clear words from you are try to look towards being a generalist and also keep upskilling while you keep sort of working on your core skills. Those should help Pratiksha. With that, we just have last 5 minutes left for the debate, and I'll quickly like to wrap it up with closing remarks on the last question that we've left here. Lessons from the corporate floors. What newbies can learn from the leaders. I'll quickly like to move on to Shaonli for this, after which I will speak to Pranali.
I think what techies get to learn from their leaders is that they're also human beings. I think that's the very first thing that they need to learn, and preach what you say is something that they will definitely look up to. So we can always talk about doing great things, right? Unleashing your potential, don't think about limitations, etc. But unless and until they see that, witness that in the leader, I think it will be very difficult for them to understand what it means and then actually follow, right? So it's very important to actually practice what you preach. And as IT leaders, I think we need to constantly create that environment or that safe place wherein all techies or the women techies on the floor have the opportunity to voice their opinions, talk about the challenges, situations that they come into, and being able to come up with a solution which in the end does not make her take a choice which is not something that she's looking up for, right? So I think we have a very, very important role to play in terms of helping them walk the path. I think that's my 2 cents on it.
Thank you so much, Pranali. Over to you.
Yeah, I'd say for a newbie, it's when you look at others, they're up a little higher on the corporate level. I think the one thing for me is we've all been through the same things. You know, the story has not been easier or difficult for anybody. It's been the same. Everyone's had the same struggles, and some have made it. And the lesson there is that, you know, as we said previously, also don't make assumptions. Don't go by, you know, what will people think, say, etc. Speak up for yourself. Don't play any, you know, victim card, etc. Because people will treat you exactly the way you treat yourself. So look up. There are a lot of examples in the corporate world, in the tech world today of very not just women, but people of different kinds. Voices, nationalities, etc., making it at the very top, and I think that's inspiring. Look at that. I think if they can make it, anybody can. So just go for it. Don't hold back.
Shilpa, your closing remarks on this.
I'll say there are 4 things that I'll request newbies and especially women to take care of. One, continuously keep learning and reskilling. It's very, very important. Second would be, it's not work versus family. It's always work and family. Sometimes work will need attention, sometimes family will need attention. So never get into the guilt trip. The third point will be proactively, continuously seek guidance and help. This will always help you to be prepared and deliver more effectively. Always keep the dialogue on with your mentors, with your sponsors, and with your leaders. And the last and the most important thing will be, always give time to yourself for your mental and physical well-being.
Great. Sugandhi, I'm waiting for your closing remarks.
Yeah, leaders are not created only when you get a designations. I mean, I have even seen the campus grads who get into corporate work can also be leaders. The fundamental thing being, have passion, have an aspiration. Because if you have the passion and the aspiration to succeed and to grow, you can chalk out your own career path for yourself. I mean, and leadership or the managerial position, all these, I mean, are the byproducts, I mean, of this passion and aspiration. Continuously keep learning, look out for challenges and try solving it, because the kind of perspective that is going to get, I mean, that's a beautiful learning. Experimental learning is much more powerful than classroom training and coaching and mentoring. So don't be complacent, don't get into BAU mode very fast. I mean, every time see whether you can do something new. At least I am a personal example where I moved from application to infrastructure without even knowing the spelling of infrastructure. So you have to get into the thick of thin, get into the game, use the resources around you, and be confident in yourself, because obviously you're going to face the roadblocks and challenges, but then solving them and then moving ahead, I mean, is all that gives you the leadership and a brilliant roadmap. There's a huge opportunity in front of us, and therefore have passion, persevere, and I think so it's a beautiful road ahead.
Great. Arun, we are waiting for your closing remarks now.
Well, sometimes going last in a group of paddleists who are so experienced is not always the best option, because they've already articulated all the great points. The only thing, couple of additions if I were to do for a newbie. In the early part of a career, keep focusing on what I would say enriching experiences and not just positions. When I say enriching experiences, move from role to role, right? It's important to build depth, but you can also do a horizontal movement to diversify your portfolio. Second is, at the end of the day, you've got to build a personal brand. So don't just focus only on the technical skills. Technical skills are important, but also on your soft skills. If you build your personal brand through a strong network, it will help you move up the corporate ladder. And of course, everything else, what my colleague said, you have to be extremely passionate. You have to take calculated risks. Each one, if you look at any successful leader, they would have done multiple roles. Right, they are constantly taking on new challenges, and the firm A good firm with a culture which has a good culture of accepting failure, right, is the best place to try new roles. So that's what, I would summarize. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. Quite a debate it has been. We try to touch upon as many pertinent topics as possible. And thank you so much for this gracious audience who has been pouring questions after questions to to this wonderful panel here. I must thank all my esteemed panelists again for sparing time for this debate. I've had personally many takeaways, and I'm sure I'm going to use some of these takeaways in my personal career journey. And I'm sure our audience would have also had many takeaways from today's discussion here. Thank you, everyone.